All right, well, welcome. Welcome to the March 28th. I'm never going to use the gavel, so I'll just give you guys bang. Welcome to the March 28th Planning Commission meeting. And Jackie, you're still working around too, so you want to do the roll call?
Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Thank you, Jackie. As you can tell, it's spring break, so it's not the full group up here. So the next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda, and we want to point out that the fact that we are missing a number of the planning commissioners, the agenda has been amended to continue the election of officers and the planning commission bylaws until April 11th, 2018. And then the order of the public hearings have also been adjusted so that the McDonald's rear side yard setback variances is now before the comprehensive plan amendment for height and density and preliminary zoning for the Hazelton Road development. So those are the only changes, correct, Jackie? Yes. Okay. So with that, is there any other adjustments to the agenda or a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve as amended.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. The next item is the approval of the Planning Commission minutes from March 14th, 2018. Any edits to those? All right.
Move to approve as amended.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion approved. All right. So the first item is a public hearing. It's a parking variance at Southdale Center on Tights, and is that correct? Garden Market.
Untight's Vegetable Farm is requesting a parking variance at Southdale Center. The proposed parking variance request accommodates a seasonal produce stand located on the north side of the mall within an existing parking area. The proposed seasonal produce stand would be open May through October and includes roughly 14,400 square feet of display area. The produce stands are permitted use in the PCD 3 zoning district. And as we've required for other recent developments at Southdale, a parking variance for the entire Southdale site is required with this request. Parking stall variances have been relatively routine with development that has occurred at Southdale. Most recent variances that have been done include the variance for Homewood Suites Hotel, the Shake Shack, and Restoration Hardware. The basis for the variances has been that parking studies have been done in association for each new project, looking at the Southdale site as a whole. The existing subject site, like I said, is a current paved parking lot at Southdale Center. Southdale is currently zoned PCD 3 and is guided in the comp plan as Community Activity Center. WSB has conducted a parking study that concludes that Southdale would have adequate parking despite the parking stalls being removed to provide for the seasonal development. The city code parking stall shortage at Southdale has not been a problem in the past approximate 10 years that they've been doing them. No permanent buildings are proposed with the proposed project, and according to the applicant, the site would take about a day to construct. Perimeter fencing is proposed to be constructed out of cinder block and timber. The greenhouse shown on the site plan would be weighed down with cinder blocks and covered with a fire-resistant plastic. The applicant would use racking and temporary pallet tables for product displays and also have wooden gazebos on site to be used as checkout locations. Staff believes that the proposed parking stall variance is reasonable. The parking study concludes that Southdale would have adequate parking despite the parking stalls being removed to provide for the development. The Southdale site is unique in the PCD 3 zoning district, and it is the only regional shopping mall in Edina, and that the variance would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So tonight, staff's recommendation is to approve the 1,270 parking stall variance for Southdale Center to allow Untight's seasonal produce stand. And the applicant is here to answer any questions, and I'm here to answer questions
All
as
right,
well.
thank you, Emily. Are there any questions for the staff? Okay, Commissioner Strauss.
Emily, would the stalls, would the facilities be left up when the market wasn't open? I mean, so it would resort back to an open parking
Yep,
space?
outside of the months through May through
So
October.
it's only when they're in operational? Okay, that's...
Any other questions for Emily? Commissioner Hamilton.
My only concern about it would be the way the pedestrian flow. I think people are pretty used to Southdale. They're pretty used to how they get to wherever it is they are, to wherever it is they're going. But this is a new place. And it seems to serve, instead of going, all the aisles are set up so you walk down the aisle towards retail, and here you're walking cross aisles to get to it. So I ask that somebody pay some attention to look at that for temporary walkways and safety.
So just kind of follow up with the emails I was sending. So this is a permitted use, so we really don't have the right to comment on the use or the fact that they're requesting a variance. Does that open the door for us to add some conditions of approval?
Only to the parking variance, not tied to the use.
Right, but the use is causing the variance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak?
Hi, my name is Craig Gelb with Untied's, pronounced as your shoes untied. I live at 17510 28th Avenue North, Plymouth, Minnesota. And I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant? No?
You might have seen some of our other operations. We operate 4 other garden centers about this size around the metro area. Eden Prairie Center. We were in Knollwood Mall off of 7 for a number of years. And Crossings Mall in Maple Grove and in Westwind Plaza in Minnetonka.
I guess I'm good.
Shirley.
What do you plan the hours of operation to be?
We'll be open every day, May 1st through October 31st, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. generally. We do scale that back in the fall with the daylight savings time. So then we're like 9 to 7.
And so when you're doing stocking or, trucks coming in and doing that sort of thing, deliveries, is that during the day or?
Yes.
Okay.
Usually before, a lot of times before hours.
In the morning?
Early in the morning. Yes.
Early morning, okay.
Great, thank you. Just don't leave yet. I mean,
Okay.
you can leave the podium, but. Okay, so this is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak? Seeing none, is there a motion
Move to close public hearing?
Is there a second? Second, all in favor? Aye. Great, so we bring it back up to the Planning Commission. Are there any other comments? No? I guess I just have one question when I see that WSB is here. When do we reach that limit? I mean, we keep adding variances, and where, are we getting close?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we're about 200 away based on, where we're at today. So there's about 200 excess, based on ITE standards, there's about 200 excess spaces out there, which isn't a lot. That's probably one more use, out there, and then they're going to be, in a situation where they're going to probably be exceeding the, the recommendations. So this one's a little unique when, it's, when we're looking at these numbers, we usually look at a December situation, so it's, we're looking at a higher peak time. This isn't gonna be operating in that time, so we really looked at a worst-case condition. This is not gonna have an issue at all in this case.
Remember how we were talking about with the Shake Shack, how it's one-way, two-way? Were you working on that one too?
Yes. Yep, the one-way, if I can remember exactly now, I don't have that in front of me, but they did change in front of the Shake Shack over to that first entrance. They changed that to a two-way operation through there. But this is past that, so it's really not going to be impacted by that. So.
Okay, great, thank you. Great. Ready to make a motion, or?
Move to approve as presented by planning.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There, motion carries. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is another public hearing. It's a rear and side yard setback variances at 3220 Southdale Circle for McDonald's.
Tonight, the applicant is requesting a side and rear yard setback variance at 3220 Southdale Circle. The proposed project is replacing the exterior of the building, ADA updates, updating the drive-through to include a second drive-through lane, a small building addition, replacing and installing new signage, restriping the parking lot, installing a new fence, and adding more landscaped green space. To accommodate the proposed changes, the applicant is requesting two variances. The first is an 8-foot variance to the side yard setback for a menu ordering canopy, and the second is a 7-foot variance request to allow an 8-square-foot building addition within the required rear yard setback. The subject property is zoned PCD3 and is guided in the comp plan as Community Activity Center. There would be no change in access to the site. The drive-through location is generally not changing, and the proposed application shows that the addition of the second drive-through lane with enough room for a pass-through lane adjacent to the new drive-through. Currently, the site has 70 parking stalls, and the proposed project shows 49 of those stalls remaining. 40 of the 49 are required by code, and the reduction in parking is to allow for additional green space on the south side of the site for additional plantings to further screen the drive-through, and then to add an additional area on the northwest corner of the site for landscaping. They also have relocated the internal parking island to allow for better traffic flow with that addition of the additional drive-through lane. The applicant is proposing to provide 8 arborvitae along the south side of the site to aid in screening for the drive-through to adjacent properties. They're also proposing a cedar fence that is proposed along the south and the east property lines to further screen the drive-through from those adjacent properties. The facade of the existing building will be updated with those proposed changes. The updated building materials include brick and aluminum paneling. And the only change to the footprint of the existing building is an 8-square-foot building addition located on the west side of the building. Staff believes that the proposal does meet the variance standards. The practical difficulty is caused by the existing location of the building. The setback on the east lot line doesn't conform to current setbacks today. An addition to that side of the building could not be done without the variance. The proposed addition in that area is reasonable, and it doesn't encroach any further into the setback than the building does today. The canopy setback for the second drive-through could not be accommodated without encroaching into the setback as well, due to the location of the existing building. The green space and landscaping to the south would be increased to minimize the impact on the property to the south, which is the Onyx apartment building. And staff believes that the variance would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So tonight, staff's recommendation is to approve the 8-foot variance to the side yard setback for menu ordering canopy and a 7-foot variance to the rear yard setback to allow for an 8 square foot building addition. Staff recommends the approval of the variance requested, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
Great, thank you, Emily. Okay, any questions for Emily? Staff? No? Great, thank you. Is the applicant here too? They'd like to present.
Hi, my name is Kevin with Landform Professional Services here on behalf of McDonald's USA. Do you need me to say the address of the office? So we're at 105 South 5th Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Yeah. Pretty low-key tonight. Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is also a public hearing. Is there anyone at the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close public hearing.
Is there a second? Second, all in favor? Aye. Great, thank you. So bringing it back to the Planning Commission, are there any other comments? Probably shouldn't be touching the mic. Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the variance request based off of the staff report.
With the conditions? Okay.
Yeah.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so the third and final public hearing tonight is a public hearing for the comprehensive plan amendment for height and density and preliminary rezoning at 3650 Hazelton Road.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. The property is located at 3650 Hazelton Road. The project requires a comp plan amendment, rezoning, and a final development plan. The subject property is located north of Hazelton as highlighted. It is the Guitar Center site. It's a one-story building with parking both on the west and the north side of the building. It is adjacent to the promenade, across from the back end of Super Target, with two commercial properties to the north and to the west, and then across the street from Think Bank. This is a survey of the property with the existing conditions and photographs of what it looks like currently. The property is zoned PCD 3, Planned Commercial District 3. It is in the MXC's district for the comprehensive plan, which allows for maximum 8 stories. It is also within the framework vision for the greater Southdale area, and it is guided as mixed use with an emphasis on housing. The project is a housing project, and this has been reviewed by the Planning Commission and the City Council, and then also Mick Johnson, who is the consultant for the Greater Southdale Area Working Group for the sketch plan submittal. So this is now finalized and is coming through the Planning Commission and Council for consideration. So at sketch plan submittal, this was the elevation of it's a multi-story apartment complex, luxury apartment complex. The current proposal would have 186 units. It's on a 1.25 acre site. It would have underground parking and also covered parking with, there are townhomes that would be, or units on the west side that would directly interface with the promenade. So this is a site plan of that sketch plan that was originally reviewed, and there were some comments by the Planning Commission, Council, and Mick Johnson, the consultant for the Greater Southdale area, at sketch plan that have been addressed with the new plan. So the applicant has gone through sketch plan process in front of the Planning Commission and City Council, and based on feedback from the Planning Commission, City Council, and McJohnson, the applicant has revised the configuration of the sidewalk on Hazelton Road to be curved. There are enhanced landscaping on all sides, and in fact, down into the promenade area. The developer will be working with the city on the interface between that. Height has increased from 17 to 19 stories based on mostly on a mechanical story that will be at the very top floor. There's really just a difference of about 8 feet. The unit increased from 170 to 186 units, but there's going to be some micro units incorporated into the project, which are smaller units, less than 500 square feet, geared towards young professionals, couples, empty nesters, people that would like to live in the area, that would like the lifestyle, the amenities of the luxury apartment complex, but perhaps really don't want the amount of space and possibly a more economical unit for them. They would meet the city's affordable housing policy. They would be dedicating $1.86 million in order to accomplish affordable housing in the city. They are proposing to provide public art on the premises, add a green roof, and then they did modify the west facade in order to address some of the concerns of McJohnson, the Commission and Council. So to accommodate the request, the following is required. A comprehensive plan amendment to increase the height maximum from 8 stories and 96 feet, which is the requirement currently in the comprehensive plan, to 19 stories and 218 feet, and increase the density in the MXC Mixed Center District from 100 units to 150 units per acre. A rezoning from PCD 3, which is currently zoned, to a planned unit development district. Staff is also recommending that flexibility language be included in the comprehensive plan to allow the city the flexibility to approve projects that would exceed the comprehensive plan height requirements through rezoning or variance in the greater Southdale area and the other MXC mixed-use centers. Because after June 30th, 2018, the Metropolitan Council will no longer consider any new amendments to the existing 2008 comprehensive plan. That, in effect, could put the city in a moratorium for building on development for a minimum of 1 year or longer, depending upon when the 2018 plan is done and when it is reviewed and approved by the Met Council. So the proposal is to change or modify the language in the MXC Mixed-Use Center, which is the portion of the greater Southdale area, the 50th and France area, and the Grandview area, which are areas that have exceeded guide plan designations for height in the past. We've had to, over the past 10 years, amend the comprehensive plan because of height. And this would then rectify that situation for those particular districts. In adopting the amendment, the city would not lose its regulatory controls in those areas, as the city has the zoning ordinance, which the underlying zoning does continue to have those heights. So height would be reviewed by either variance or PUD, and it would not require then a comprehensive plan amendment in the MX zones. Now, these changes, to be clear, would not impact the recent small area plans in 44th and France, Valley View and Wooddale, or 70th and Cahill, because those 3 areas are neighborhood commercial. They're not MXC. So it's this recommended language would not affect any of those 3 small area plans. So staff has come up with the highlighted language, which would be added to the existing comp plan language, which would include that the City Council may consider individual projects that exceed the height requirements for the different areas of the comp plan, the 4.6B, and in the MXC Mixed Use Center through a rezoning or PUD variance, and then consideration for exceeding those height limits should be conditioned on addressing city's working principles, meeting exceeding goals and policies outlined in the comp plan, providing exceptional building quality, use of podium or liner buildings, sustainable measures within the development, pedestrian-oriented development, providing significant publicly accessible space, public realm and green space, enhancing the experience in the area where development is proposed, utilizing underground parking, providing affordable housing, proximity to low-density uses, utility capacity, level of transit service available, and provisions to reduce negative impact on adjacent roads, and meeting variance or PUD criteria. So any consideration for exceeding height limits should include those considerations. And so these are the diagrams or the maps within the comp plan that it's being proposed would address that amendment. It would be the MXC zone, which would be Grandview, MXC, which would be 50th and France. It would not change anything at the neighborhood commercial nodes at 44th and France or Valley View and Wooddale. And then it would also address the greater Southdale area that has MXC zone within it. It would not affect the neighborhood commercial node within 70th and Cahill. So this is our zoning overlay district. This would not change. All of the current height requirements would remain. It would be a function of zoning. If there ever were to be a request to go beyond the current zoning, then it wouldn't have to go also in front of the Met Council. If it exceeded those requirements, it would be up to the Planning Commission and Council for review through a variance or PUD process. So the compliance table that was included in your sketch plan review is very similar with the exception that the building did get taller based on the additional height for the mechanicals. So it's at 19 stories or 218 feet, but the remainder of the proposal is pretty much the same. The parking stalls requirements are 340, and they're proposing 298. The other change that is being requested that city staff is recommending would be the MXC district comprehensive zone language that would allow some flexibility for up to 150 units per acre through a PUD rezoning to accommodate this request and others if they do come before the 2018 comp plan. Based on criteria to justify greater density, which would include addressing the working principles for development of a building, use of podium or liner buildings, sustainability, pedestrian orientation, development, additional public space, public realm, provision of more green space, enhancing the experience of the area where development is proposed, underground parking, affordable housing, proximity to low density uses, utility capacity, level of transit service available, and impact on adjacent roads. And going back to the chart, this also was in your sketch plan. It outlines some of the unit counts within the area and then also the units per acre. Actually, the units per acre would be closer to 86 units per acre if you consider the area that is up against the promenade that's interfacing with it. If you include that square footage, it does bring it down to about 86 units per acre. This is the public discretion land use process pyramid that our city attorney has oftentimes brought up, and I bring it up this evening to point out that a zoning ordinance amendment and comprehensive plan is at the bottom, and it's in the green color, and it is the most discretionary decision that the Planning Commission and Council can make. So this is the Edina Promenade Residences plan with the elevations showing the height, the mechanicals on the top floor and the different portions. They are using high quality materials as indicated in the slide, and some other views of the project from different angles and getting down closer to the podium height. The tallest portion of the building is more in the center of the building with a podium that circles the entire building. And then a closer view of some of the amenities. There's going to be a rooftop pool. There will be some art included. This shows you that interface with the promenade. There'll be sidewalks going right down to the promenade. And they did include an architectural lighting strategy as it would look lit up. We have some sections. And then it was requested that they do a shadow study. The shadow study indicates that it's quite a tall but very narrow building, so the impact of the shadow study really is in the winter months, as you can see. And then the landscape plan, which actually will be worked out with the city along with the developer and along that promenade on the west side, or east side, pardon me. So grading and utilities, the city engineer has reviewed the proposed plans and found them to be acceptable, subject to the comments and conditions outlined in the attached memo. A site improvement plan agreement would be required for the construction repair of sidewalks and utilities and connections to the promenade. Any approvals of the project would be subject to review by the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, as they are the city's review authority for grading on this particular site. So the primary issue, staff does recommend approval. It does meet the comprehensive plan amendment. His height, if the height is reasonable for the site, staff does recommend that alternate language that would certainly rectify any issues then we would have in going forward past June 30th, the deadline with the Metropolitan Council. Is a comprehensive plan amendment regarding density reasonable for the site? That is the area in Southdale that is slated and targeted for a higher density, and it is, it can support the density, and given the location, it's been reviewed by the consultant of the Greater Southdale area. And in fact, there was an email from him, and that's in front of you. He did review the most recent proposal, not just the sketch plan, and his comment was that it looks like all of his concerns were addressed. So staff does support the request as submitted. We do have the development team members present. There's Tom Lund with Lund Real Estate Partners. We have Gretchen Camp with ESG. We have Trace Jacques, also with ESG. We have Terry Manerick with Confluence and David Bade with Westwood. And so with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
So, Chris, you said that there was a memo from Mick?
No, I'm sorry if I said a memo, an email saying that he did review it. And it should have been set out in front of you. Well, it's actually from Sarah in care of Mick. He did review, and he didn't have any additional comments.
We do? I'm not seeing it. Okay. And then can you also just review the affordable housing, what they're proposing with that?
They are proposing a dedication of $1.68 million for affordable housing to be provided somewhere within the city. The HRA and the East Edina Housing Foundation has also weighed in on if there is a project that has dedication as opposed to providing the units, what is a reasonable amount, and they've settled on, and it's reflected in this project of $100,000 per unit.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Chris, Commissioner Strauss?
How is that commitment? Is there a developer's contract or something, that affordable housing commitment? I mean, how does?
That has.
So they're not going to actually build units. It's a contribution to the city.
It's a dedication, yes.
Okay.
And that would have to be dedicated before they get a certificate of occupancy, before it's final. The building is final.
Commissioner Lee.
So Chris, what's the city's plan for using that money?
Well, they're working on that. And they are looking at sites actually within the Southdale area. Also, there's some opportunities closer to the industrial areas. There isn't a specific project currently, but they are working on that.
So in order to use that money, does the city become the developer and actually goes out and purchases property and hires?
It's possible. That's a
Or
possibility.
can any of the funds be given towards another project? Let's say we had funds and we actually asked these guys, we want you to put more affordable into it and we're willing to compensate you for the, is that another means?
Yes, I think the HRA is looking at all opportunities.
I think that some of those policies probably need to be made a little more clear. I think, we understand pay to get out of that requirement, but it's hard to weigh it for the opportunity to actually have those units built now. As you know, when we're having a terrible time trying to get affordable units in, and it seems to be the preference that it's better to have it a little more dispersed throughout the city rather than trying to find one site and plunk it all down. So, could you do one favor for me? Could you put up the shadow study again? I don't think that was in our packet. Was that in our packet? The shadow picture. I just wanted to take a look at it. It just went by pretty quickly. Thanks.
It should have been in the packet. It's probably towards the back. And I would probably defer any questions about the shadow study to the member of the team that can address that.
So there is significant shadow coverage on the promenade itself. It looks like March, September, so that's about now, or the same equinox in the fall. And the timing of this is, let's see, so it's somewhere, it's going to move from there till, I guess we don't know, till the sun sets. And the other long shadow then is in the morning, same time frame.
Right.
Early season, early spring, early fall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll have the applicant come up.
Here? Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Lund. My address is 5319 Oaklawn Avenue, Edina. My company is Lund Real Estate Partners here in Edina. Thank you again for allowing us to meet with you this evening. Our goal is to present this project to you in 20 minutes or less. I understand last time we went a little bit longer than we should have, so we'll try and make it quick. I also want to just mention that John Trouts and Vince Dreesen, my partners, are sitting on the right side back here in the back row. The last time we met, we had each of you had very specific comments and suggestions, and we took your comments and suggestions very seriously and to heart, and began to work to respond to the things that you said and the things that were important to you. And hopefully that our presentation tonight will please you and meet your vision for the site. So before I hand things over to Gretchen from ESG, I just want to quickly mention a couple things that I think I may have mentioned before, but I just want to mention them again, that I really believe that this product, this housing type, doesn't exist in Edina. And a high-rise concrete structure that is highly amenitized, So I think it's going to be really unique, and I think it'll be very, very popular. In fact, it doesn't exist anywhere in the suburbs. So, it's just a real opportunity, I think, to bring some real quality, to Edina. We also believe it's going to be very, very popular with a broad spectrum of residents. It can be young professionals, it could be empty nesters, it could be families, it could be somebody who just moved here, it could be a college grad, or maybe somebody who just moved back from working in another city after they've graduated, and they're just kind of getting their feet on the ground. So I think that's going to be real popular as well. And the other thing, I think it'll just bring a real sense of community. If you've ever been to, I'm most familiar with Nick on Fifth or Carlisle or the lakes down at Calhoun, just the vibrancy. You've got young and old, and you've got professionals, and you've got retired, and you've got, all likes of life, walks of life, and it's really a fun community, and it's just, you can feel the energy when you're in the elevator or the common areas of the amenity spaces. It's just a really nice place to live, and I think that this will be very similar to that. And finally, I just wanted to just reiterate that, we worked hard to meet your goals, the goals of the Southdale area planning vision, the Southdale principles that you've set forth. And we believe that's really a forward-thinking project that'll be a catalyst for other, similar development just in this area as land becomes available. I think it really, we all believe it really addresses many of your, like I said, much of your vision and many of your goals, and that's going to be just a really nice addition to Edina, a place for people to stay in Edina. So I guess with that, I would like to thank you all for taking time with us this evening, and I'd like to hand this over to Gretchen.
Good evening, Commissioners. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Gretchen Camp from ESG 500 South Washington Avenue in Minneapolis. Since we last saw you in January, there's been a number of project updates to the development, and we just wanted to go over those. I'm going to give a brief summary of those updates, and then the various team members are going to go into more detail on the project revisions. So since we last met with you, we did add a level of parking to the project. That was a discussion we had. Actually, some of the commissioners that aren't here tonight talked about that at length with us. So we added a level to the parking podium. So instead of 255 stalls previously, we have 298 stalls, and we just feel like that's a good number to accommodate both residents and guest parking. As staff pointed out, we have a club room and outdoor amenity space on the rooftop. That's a change from last time. Instead of 5 townhomes on the promenade, we now have 6 townhomes, just adding more activity along the promenade. We talked with you, your group a bit about lighting. So Trace from ESG will go through all the building design updates. He'll touch on lighting. He'll show you the east corner of the building where we've added more glass for more transparency and visibility through the lobby. Also on the north and west facades, there's been some updates to combine brick and metal to vary those expressions on those facades. He'll go into more detail about the brick, precast, metal panel, and wood accents on the building. Those have been really defined since sketch plan. And finally, we have mechanical. He'll show some images of the screening that we're doing for the mechanical, and then sustainable design strategies throughout the project. Terry Menarek from Confluence will go through the updates on the site design and landscape, not only, including on the corner. If you remember, we have that kind of public amenity space where we have art, outdoor seating, a lot of plantings that kind of define that space, so he'll walk through that. Also through the updates along Hazelton Road, as we talked about with having a meandering path there to get kind of people more safely away from the curb. So he'll walk through that, and as well as the promenade design that's been quite enhanced since you last saw it. Lastly, Terry will show you the dog play area that we've added on the western edge of the project, and then the screening that's provided for the service and loading area. Finally, David Bade will go through the stormwater management. There's a lot of enhancements that have been added since last time, including permeable pavers in the auto court, green infrastructure that he'll detail, all of those enhancements basically to meet city and watershed requirements. So with that, Trace will start us off.
Thank you, Gretchen. I'm Trace Schock, ESG Architects, 500 Washington Avenue, South Minneapolis. I'm just up here to basically visually describe what Gretchen has already told you. So just a little quick primer. We've got the tower and the building base or plinth. The plinth is red, the tower is yellow. But this, unlike before, actually shows some of that mechanical equipment on the top, as well as showing some of the landscape plan. But Terry will talk about that in more detail. Again, just a basic, how does this block plan out at the ground level? You have parking on the west half and those townhomes on the east half with the very transparent lobby, amenity area, and leasing offices, that type of thing. We added an additional townhome unit, which actually has an additional bay, more glass, much more connectivity even than we had before with the promenade. So here's our new nighttime rendering or dusk rendering. A couple elements to make note of. It's been affectionately called the lightsaber. That's really just indicating a location for public art that might have a nighttime signature, and that is really a tie more to the light poles up and down France Avenue. That type of gesture that says I'm not just a daytime event, I'm also a nighttime. Very elegant, subtle lighting at the top of the building, primarily highlighting the precast material on all facades. On the back side, which was in your comp plan amendment, we have some slot windows that would also be lit, which would basically face east. And then a lot of subtle architectural accent lighting around the base of the building. And then the lobby itself would have a nice warm glow. Again, some of the basics, the building base or plinth and how it addresses the promenade. Because of the additional level of parking, we also have an additional level of basically windows on Hazelton and windows on the promenade as well. Looking a little northwesterly, you see some of the landscape enhancement. This is that public art element. Terry will talk more to the details of the elements, but when we were before you in our first presentation, it was much more rudimentary in nature with regards to any kind of landscape development and somewhat architectural development as well. Here you see a total of 6 bays now, much more windows again, a lot more transparent feeling, much more engaging. A little closer up, the whole connection to the promenade and our lobby and what we call the front porch is different now, and it feels a much more, it's got a different flow to it that we like. It's much more elegant and refined. Before it was pretty direct, and an architect was designing the last one, not a landscape design. So down low, you see how the building's very much enhanced by the landscaping, and you see much more glass down at grade and along the promenade in general. Down along the promenade, it's a layered approach toward gaining connectivity, but also privacy because of the dynamic you have between public and private. These are livable stoops. They're not just walk up and ring the doorbell. This is a place where people have furniture, tables and chairs, and actually meet and socialize. And then you see the rich mix of brick and metal panel. This is that front porch. Again, it's framed by landscape, connected to public art. It fronts Hazelton, and it's got this nice dual nature. It's public and private at the same time. A view from the roundabout toward our arrival court. I think the additional floor actually really enhanced the experience down from the street level and the pedestrian. In the arrival court, we'll talk about the permeable pavers and that type of thing, but it's a very rich, elegant, contemporary experience, very high-end. Rooftop terrace, there's a lot of green up there. The pool is up there. This is a view looking south. A lot of connection to the city at that level, but in a different way than you connect at street level. And this image, it isn't as glitzy, but it represents and shows some of the enhancements to the western facade. Before it was basically all brick and glass, and we've introduced the dark metal panel, and it has a little more feeling of kind of transparency or openness. I think the contrast and the complementary nature of the brick and metal and glass are stronger now than they were before. And then you see the north facade as well. This is, we took an opportunity, we had some extra space up in here, which is actually primarily a mechanical floor, but we had some leftover space that we are maximizing and turning into a kind of a sky lounge with its own roof terrace. And you get a great skyline view and yet another way of connecting to the city beyond. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terry, and he's going to get into much more detail about the ground plane, the landscape design, which I think is really a really special feature to this project. Thank you.
So I'll give you a quick overview of the site plan. We did listen to a lot of the comments that we heard previously with a lot of the connectivity that we're looking for to the promenade, the front appearance of it along Hazelton, as well as the whole overall site as it goes around the building with the connectivity to the community. One of the key things that we did on the site here, and is a really strong feature, was the idea of capturing stormwater. We took the stormwater from the building and actually engaged some of the city property on the edge of the development to create a infiltration basin area that becomes not only a landscape feature, but also serves as a public awareness project to show that green infrastructure can be captured and reused on the site, how it's treated and how it's purified before it goes into our storm system, as opposed to just dumping it into a drain and assuming it's going to head off somewhere nice and clean. So this actually creates an amenity as well as defines the edge of the promenade and creates a really nice educational and thoughtful, sustainable design to the overall project. One of the other things we did that Trace talked about was this idea of connecting at the corner of the promenade in Hazelton. As you're approaching this area, before you remember, we kind of had an angled access way to the corner of the front porch. What this does is really creates a defined entry to the front porch. And one of the comments that we actually received from one of your planning commissioner members was to create some kind of sculptural feature on that corner that serves as an icon. I think Trace did a great job of kind of identifying some focal point there. And in this plinth that comes up from the edge of the promenade and the public sidewalk, which has been curved to kind of reflect a larger landscape along the street, as well as bring you into the site development, we create this plinth that becomes a focal point to whatever that sculptural element can be. And that kind of ties itself to the development as well as the art piece that lends itself to the promenade and a lot of the art that happens along the promenade. We also carry this into our public court with another piece of art that begins to tie the development together to the promenade and the rest of the city. One of the other things we did was begin to frame the front porch. You'll notice we had masses of planting that kind of define the public from private, but also allow that visibility between the public street and the front porch. So it's very inviting, very welcoming, and it creates a really strong formal entry to the side of the building. And then placing bosques of trees to kind of define and frame a lot of these spaces within the site. Along the western side of the site, we use some bosques and planting of shrubs and grasses to frame that service loading dock area so that we don't really see it from the street and it becomes somewhat hidden. And then as we move to the back, that gets framed again as well, which begins to hide our our dog run area that we'll have at the back side of the building, kind of keeping it more of a private space away from the highly detailed public area, but still providing that opportunity for the residents to have a place to take their dog. And then defining that pathway along the north side that we talked about with a well-landscaped buffer edge in between. We're kind of constricted for space there. It would be nice to do a little bit more, but what we're thinking about doing there is to provide some nice shrubs and perennial plantings to add color and vibrancy to the north side of that building as well. As Trace mentioned, we also have the side lots to the liner housing on the base of the garage. This creates kind of a private lawn for each one of those residents, but with the adjacent taller grasses that are located within the green infrastructure swale, that provides us a nice separation that is still visible and still welcoming, but it provides a private from public kind of relationship. And then finally, we did add in this other feature that we'll need to talk to the city about, but we think the previous design was very wide open, somewhat stark and barren. So what we tried to do is create a bosque of trees to create a series of rooms there that could be added as future sculptural pieces within the space and provide a really nice buffer landscape between the backside of the target development, which is primarily the backside of a big box, and create a well-used landscape within that area. So we talked about a lot of the same things that we're using in some of this. You saw some of it reflected in the renderings, the step up, the front porch idea, the drop-off elegance. The amenity deck, you saw kind of an early concept. We haven't dove in deep into that amenity deck yet. Some of the interior development will reflect what we do in the outside space, but we're still shooting for this level and this detail of development. And then what we talked about in the green infrastructure swale is this idea of a mass planting, as you see in the top right here, that'll kind of begin to reflect that green infrastructure as well as provide that buffer landscaping. And then other parts of the building, maybe on the north side, as some additional pollinator gardens and things like that in. These are just some study models that we did to kind of give you a quick overview of what we're talking about, but you see that bosque of trees in the promenade, how that begins to frame a room with a sculptural piece in the middle, the green infrastructure swale and how that provides that essence on the side to create that nice buffer separation, but also enhances the promenade itself. And then also the art piece or sculptural piece on the corner. And this lower bottom picture kind of shows you that feel when you're down in the space and what that might feel like. And now we'll talk about stormwater.
Thank you. I'm David Bade with Westwood, 12701 Whitewater Drive, Minnetonka. Just touch base a little bit on the stormwater management, again, following with Terry on really that green corridor. As you've seen, the current site stormwater is untreated. Basically, most of the site drains through the existing parking lot, including most of the roof. So really all the stormwater is hitting that pavement surface. It's running off into a single point storm sewer, into the city street, and ultimately into the city system. So all of that's hitting the parking lot. All the salts, the sands, the contaminants are really currently being run off that way. The redevelopment really provides an opportunity. The building takes up really a lot of the site, and as such, that's really an improvement just in and of itself. That's creating roof water, which is going to be essentially clean water. So that really allows us to take the opportunity to look at infiltration. This site is very well set up for it, has good sands underneath it, underlying sands, and so what we're going to be looking to do is utilize those sands both in a surface treatment, the visual promenade area, and then also a subsurface below the parking area and the drive-through in the front. The permeable pavers are planned on the auto court area. Again, that's to promote the hardscape point source infiltration. Essentially, rainfall, where it hits, it infiltrates immediately. That's a good best management practice with the watershed. Infiltration, again, basin will collect the clean roof runoff from the apartments facing the promenade. So a limited portion of that, but essentially going into this swale, going into this infiltration basin. The subsurface infiltration basin will collect the remainder of the roof and really just the remainder of the entrance drive. And again, that is sized larger than 50% of what is required. We're somewhat limited by space just because of proximity to setbacks and some of the easements with City Street, but ultimately what all of those together mean between the permeable pavers, the green swale, infiltration subsurface, and then subsurface is that we're going to be somewhere between 2 to 3 times above the watershed basic minimum requirements. And as such, we're going to be looking to really get in with their watershed stormwater volume credit program. This is similar, and they've used this across the street at 71 France and the Byerly's redevelopment, and that was really our first step into that and looking to provide a benefit for other developments that may be more challenging. And so what it essentially is a volume credit program. The watershed manages that. If a certain project brings more stormwater improvement, essentially that can be banked. They keep track of that and then bring that to other developments that may be under more constrictive site restraints. I'll touch base just briefly. Go forward. Just briefly again, the stormwater from the promenade area essentially will be drained through the swale here. And again, this is going to be this area of surface infiltration tied into the city storm sewer here. The rest of the building, including the rooftop deck, will drain into the underground system here, which also has overflow capacity for the paved area here. And again, just kind of see that area going down to the surface, and then the subsurface will be tucked essentially right in here between the front of the building and Hazelton Road. And with that, I'll turn that back over to Gretchen.
Thanks for allowing us to do the presentation, and we're around for questions, and any one of us, just depending on your question, we'll have team members come up.
Great. Are there questions for the applicant? Commissioner Hamilton?
What level, I think you mentioned in that you were looking at a LEED certification, what level?
I think that right now we're exploring either LEED certification or green globes, and we haven't nailed down an exact green rating system yet. I think a building of this type with the location that it's at and just the, naturally what it is would be probably at like a silver level. But again, we haven't really committed to a specific program yet.
A little forward maybe to that question. We just came from a study session just before this meeting, and it was brought to our attention and reminded us that the 2008 comp plan, Edina was the only community in the Met Council that had a chapter on sustainability and set goals and talked about the necessity for paying attention to those goals.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah.
Fortunately, you're the first project that came back to us after we got reminded of that. So, and
yeah.
Thank you for the stormwater piece that you brought to the table, I think, is very much in line with the sort of things that they were looking for.
Absolutely.
But the only thing I would ask you for is perhaps two pieces. One of them is look hard at the sustainability for the building to do what you can, what you believe you can, and certainly what we all should do. To make it appropriate. The other one is the educational piece, which I think is really important. That promenade is there. It's there for you. I think you fit up against it beautifully. The two are made for each other. But what a great way to help residents, Edinians, understand how buildings can work in the 21st century. And maybe there's a piece of your sculptural pieces that are there that can tie in to some of the wonderful things you're doing with water quality and help people understand here's what's happening here.
Yeah, we're excited about that opportunity for sure.
I got to interrupt because I totally skipped the public hearing piece. I'm sorry. So we're going to open it to the public for comment. I apologize for that if there was anyone here who wanted to speak. Is there anyone from the public who has any comments? Okay, great.
I guess you were highly appropriate after all.
Yeah. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close public hearing.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, aye. I apologize for that. Come on back up.
Other questions?
Did I cut you off? Were you done? Okay.
Thank you.
Other comments? No comments? Commissioner Lee?
Hey, Gretchen.
Hi.
I don't own dogs, so explain that dog run and what's that used for versus like taking your dog out for a walk.
Yeah, I think it's actually, probably we could call it more of a dog relief area, play area, versus, there's just so many miles and miles of pathways and walkways to actually go exercise and take your dog for a walk. But it's really, and maybe Terry could describe the makeup of it, but you have a crushed, either a rock or a crushed marble under a sand layer. And then sometimes we actually put artificial turf on there. A, it's green all year round, and B, it can be removed and hosed down pretty easily. So we haven't really, I don't think, specified the surface, but there's kind of a number of surfaces, and it's really for relief. Yep.
I was sort of going back through my notes from the sketch plan, which wasn't too long ago, so luckily it was still fresh in my mind. It didn't seem like the building changed that much in design, and I seem to recall that there was some strong recommendation that you really attempt to do something truly I see this as the gateway project for the promenade there. So in some respects, I'm just slightly disappointed. I mean, I think it's a beautiful building, but yet in some ways I don't find it all that unique. And I guess I was looking for something there on the corner, particularly the entryway to the promenade, that would really seem to feel more as the public realm versus the corner of this project. Is there something in there that maybe I'm missing as far as what was addressed about the art and how that entry sequence is and the landscaping? I believe you took the sidewalk back a little farther. You're curving it around now, or have you perhaps integrated it into your property?
Yeah, I think what we used as a point of departure was this idea of kind of a sequence of spaces, a sequence of connection, rather than the direct route, because that was almost a little too blunt, a little too abrupt. And in a sense, what we did was create events. We create places for gathering to happen instead of, in a sense, meeting in the hallway. You're meeting in little places along the way. So, and again, we're actually integrating some of the landscape, took cues from the architecture and really translated into very linear expressions and square expressions and that type of thing. And then, of course, we pulled the sidewalk away from Hazelton to get a little kind of sensation or safety factor included. But the lobby itself is it's basically a 2-story tall lobby of sheer glass on the corner. And now with the focal point of the art, that you have this sort of 360-degree focus around the art, but you're also looking past the art into the building, out to the promenade, out to the street, that type of thing. So we were asked architecturally to open up more along the promenade, which we did. We defined our materials more clearly. It's a very, again, I believe it to be a truly elegant design all around. On the west facade, with the addition of the parking level, as it was prior to the current design, it felt a little more solid. And by introducing the metal panel where we did, it doesn't feel that way anymore. It's not quite such a barrier. The other element that we talked about was the lighting strategy to the building. And I think the architectural goal is really a more contemporary, inviting, elegant design to a high-rise building. So with a lot of transparency, but a lot of permanence, I guess, to it as well.
Now that sidewalk, the one that's sort of a kind of a beige color there, are you proposing a different material there, or is that just a rendering of sort of what is existing now?
That would be what's existing now, actually.
Okay, so your property or your design comes up to and meets it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess I'm
in more of a plaza. Before it was more of just a straight walk. And we're creating a sequence of plazas up to the porch.
So would you see the public walking up those steps and hanging around there?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, the whole area with the numbers, this is all seating. And then you have opportunities to create more seating up here, and then you step up, and this is all outdoor public seating, basically. So it's a multi-dimensional kind of experience. It's not just a single one-liner.
So spillover from the promenade would be okay if a street
Yeah.
performer wanted to
Sure.
park down there and start banging on some drums or something. That's
Yeah.
not out of the picture
Yeah,
or out
well-
of possibility here.
Maybe not the electric guitar one, but maybe a drum. I don't know.
All right. And then one question about the parking or pull-in. So I'm imagining there's going to be drop-offs, people getting rides, people coming to visit, package delivery,
Yes.
Uber rides, and Amazon Prime. Where do they typically go? How do they enter that, and how do they exit?
Oh, let me go back to the site plan. But okay, basic circulation is counterclockwise. You come in on the right side, you're dropping off, and you're leaving. So there's opportunity. We have it basically two car widths wide, so there's always a passable lane around it. But it operates similar to, I wouldn't say it a cul-de-sac because there's an object in the center, but you have plenty of freedom of movement. Generally, a lot of the deliveries or Uber pickups are very quick just by nature. They're not sitting there parked for any extended period of time, but feasibly, technically, you could actually have 4 cars or even 5 cars parked in this drive court and still have straight through access to the parking and bypass access for people picking up or dropping off in addition to that. So.
And they would parallel park along the curb?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so if someone wanted to drop off and have to go in for a few minutes, is that their space there, or is there somewhere else in the parking garage that they would go
Basically, what Gretchen had alluded to is we've got, how many stalls? 289? 298, sorry. But basically, this level of about between 30 and 40 stalls could be basically given over to guest parking.
Okay.
Entirely. So the door would open or just be open on that level depending on the weather. Security would happen, probably at the bottom and at the midpoint, going up and going down.
And then just a final comment, I think, on the overall site. I think it's well landscaped. Just a slight disappointment that the back of the building still feels very much like a back of a building. I don't know if at this point if there's any way to pull that north facade in further so that you don't have that sidewalk slapped up against I don't know what is that, a 3-foot strip of green. But eventually that will be an east-west corridor.
Yes.
And it feels very much like a wall. So I think some of the things that you have done on the east side, west side, to address that may need to be carried around or looked at in some way for that backside. This building in particular will have no backsides. That's true because it's going to have circulation all around it. So it's
we did try to mix up the experience and the materiality along there. It's tough. This is a very small site. When the 200 foot by 200 foot module or block dimension is becoming, this is the cornerstone, the first of the building block here. You do start to run into these issues with and it generally is an issue with parking. When you're parking within that dimension, you can never have one flat deck. It's always the sloping deck within that. And the economies of getting that to physically work, the economies of trying to elevate a little bit those entry patio or porches on the promenade side, getting the grades to actually work from the roundabout on the south side, getting the desired setback off Hazelton. It's a real tight, it's almost a Swiss watch to get this building to work and fit just dimensionally and geometrically, given the grades And also, just as a side note, there's a water table which is limiting how low we can go as well. So it's like we're capped at the top, or we can't go any lower. We
Yeah,
can't
I'm
go
sure you
this way
are.
and that way, and
Mhm.
it's a tough one. So
And that's
we
why
really
you're the
did try
designer.
to vary up the expression and the materiality, and this isn't really doing the landscape justice on that side. But the assumption and the hope is that the next property will maybe offset itself a little bit more to have a little more breathing room on that side. And then the other element would be, where is that future road alignment going to be? Will that allow for something? Because that was a conversation, a pretty long conversation about what we're doing on that west facade.
Mhm.
And we, in a sense, enhanced our already enhanced facade because it is a side facade, but a future street facade. But until that street alignment is defined, we really are kind of in a little bit of a limbo. So we tried to make it as nice as we could, and hopefully maybe there's a liner element that comes in the future, but it would require a road alignment to be defined before we can actually commit to something like that.
Well, don't be timid, because what you do will help to define the street. In some
Yes.
ways, seeing the dog park and so little relegated to the pedestrian on the north side, it feels a little imbalanced to me. So I'll just leave you with that thought and let someone else have a turn. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, I was looking at the notes from the sketch plan, and, one of the things was attention to all four sides. I truly believe you succeeded with certainly the south and the east side. There had been a lot of comment or talk about that where the townhomes were and the connection to the promenade. I think that's a wonderful. I think you absolutely hit it there. Engaging it, it looks attractive. It looks like it's connected, but still not on top of it. I mean, I think that's very good.
Yeah.
In the public areas, I think on the south side, what art gets selected, that's certainly something that will get resolved. There's a lot of talented people that will bring things forward that aren't imagined right now. But I think that view you have there, that rendering, it's stunning. I think from the south, as you're on Hazelton Road, I think that's and then if you can assure those sunsets, then I think you're going to have a very successful project there. Thank you.
Any comments? Commissioner Bennett.
There's a few things. When this first came to us, I wasn't here for the sketch plan, but reviewed it nonetheless. And maybe I echo what Susan said. I think at first, some of these renderings, minus that awesome one, some of them don't, I think, do the building as good of justice as it could, just from the pictures we see. And so, as maybe, at first glance, it looks pretty nice. And then, our temptation, at least with something in a mixed-use center, we kind of want to see some mix of uses there. And I see with a tight site, the challenge there. And I think, you've almost fully convinced me of this development. From your presentation, just kind of blown away by your focus and attention and commitment to the guiding principles of the Southdale area, and the fact that Mick didn't have many comments to address again kind of shows that very well. But everything that you've done to really take a stance on the sustainable measures, take a stance on for what you could with integrating that pedestrian viewpoint and vantage point of walking up and interfacing. Well, I mean, that's going to be a memorable spot. People walk on the promenade. They're going to remember being surrounded in this nature and seeing how people can live right up next to it and how that engages the residents. I think that just, drives everything home that we'd like to see. So I commend you on that. And I maybe just have a few questions. Kind of piggybacking on what some of the other commissioners said. At least for the educational piece that you mentioned, and you said that you're going to focus on it, could you explain, at least in a way that you imagine that being communicated to the public who's walking by or sitting down?
Yeah, and I think the question's more directed at the landscape and the green infrastructure. So I'm going to go to that other shot right there. So I think, just talking about this and hearing some of the comments, I think there's a great opportunity here, and we kind of did envision that aspect, that there would be some opportunity for some interpretive paneling or something along there to be an educational tool for people as they're walking by to understand what's going on. And it starts with the edge condition that we deal with here. So that plaza that you're seeing in that image with the permeable pavers begins to describe what we're doing in the drop-off court. It begins to describe that hard landscape and how that could be something that could capture stormwater and not just sheet it off into the street. So that's the first step. So you kind of see the existing conditions of the sidewalk, you move into the permeable, and then from there you move into a planted and landscaped area which helps to reduce runoff. And then from that it's one step further that takes you into that stormwater green infrastructure swale that kind of begins to really capture and purify it before it gets reused or recycled within the system. So I think doing all that along with a lot of the plantings that we're doing on that edge too begin to help with solar gain. It begins to help and shade and provide opportunities for shade. So I think we were just talking about it here when you guys mentioned that, and we have been discussing the idea of putting panels along there. We should have probably showed you some of those concepts, but we are talking about those ideas along that edge definitely to kind of provide that opportunity to the public.
Great, thank you. My next question kind of ties into the landscaping, but this is a good image. What you guys have done with that front corner it's really beautiful. The design is, incredible. I kind of have some thoughts that echo what Commissioner Lee brought up of how does it really engage people. I see it as it's so nice and it's kind of a little removed where people might think, can I be here? And so however you can maybe integrate the landscape or maybe step some paneling in to kind of lead people to that art. So, I know you said that front porch is kind of public, but I just don't think it would feel like that to just a pedestrian walking up. And maybe you don't want that to really feel like that, but just to encourage people more to that piece of art versus it just being something nice to look at, but something nice to engage with and sit around.
Yeah, and I do think that would be critical. Whatever that is will draw people over to take a look at it.
Yeah.
And I think the more we make it inviting with maybe some form of signage talking about the piece of art that people can walk up and read and how that engages them. And then if somebody that lives there is sitting on that front porch and says, hey, Commissioner Bennett, come on up. Sit down with me. Have a drink.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
That's kind of the anticipation of that. So.
Cool. And then just regarding some safety for pedestrians, people that live at this building specifically, but along that north side, just where it's tight up against the building, do you have any at least lighting plans for making that a more safe journey along? I could imagine it gets dark and maybe it's not as enticing as these other sides, so I just couldn't see it from any pictures or if that was considered, but just curious.
Yeah, and I think any type of lighting that would happen along there would probably be building mounted, so that would address that northern edge with the tight constraints of the space. I think the more porosity we have to the edge of the promenade, to the opposite side on the west, to kind of invite you into that space, and what Trace is talking about with building treatments, and maybe we begin to grow some of that green infrastructure up the side of the building that kind of makes it a little more less feel like a wall than it does feel like a corridor or a space. So.
Regarding the amenity deck, I know you guys didn't really vet it out much, and you mentioned how you treat stormwater down in the swale. I'm assuming part of that roof deck is intended to treat some of the stormwater as well. I don't know if you could just speak to that and why it wasn't really incorporated on the very top roof deck with the mechanical equipment.
Yeah, I think this is the largest of the amenity deck spaces. There is some private terrace spaces on the opposite side as well, but anywhere where we have the green kind of indicated on some of those plans, I don't know if that first image shows that well. So any of those larger green spaces that you see in those terrace decks would be a lawn type surface that could capture a lot of that stormwater, hold it before it gets sent into the infiltration areas or the underground infiltration areas that we have associated with the site, begin to slow down some of that stormwater runoff within those spaces. So
in the yellow boundary area, how much of that is personal terraces, or is that all?
Primarily, we just have the top rooftop one within that space that happens up here. And that's set back from the edge of that larger parapet too. You can kind of see it's a smaller space, and I'm guessing that's based on occupancy. So the second level terraces that we have at the amenity level deck here would be these green areas along this amenity space, as well as these more private terraces and this one over here as well. So it does begin to illustrate some of those green ideas on those rooftop spaces.
Yeah, and I guess just to echo kind of what Commissioner Hamilton said, if there's any ability to incorporate just a little more of that green on there to just even make more of a step forward, that'd be very well appreciated.
Sure.
And then I guess my last kind of general question is to Mr. Lund, if you didn't have so many constraints on the site with, obviously cost and space and size, what else would you like to have done here? More. Yeah.
Probably gone taller. That's probably what I would do.
Okay.
But we are really constrained by parking, and so it's a balance. So.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I do think that the extra level of parking really, that extra level really helps engage the pedestrian feel and breaks up the mass of the building. But thanks for your comments. That's all I have.
Thanks. So I have a couple questions. But it might be like it might reach out to all you guys. But to start with, so I kind of copy what Commissioner Lee said about just the city. We should really start looking at the policies. I know they're working on for affordable housing, but I keep touching the mic, sorry. I really think that we need to understand where this funding is going and that it's actually starting to be used. Because I look at this site and I just think that this is the ideal location for affordable housing. You've got jobs, you've got transit, it just seems like the perfect place. So the question to you is, why are you not providing the affordable housing as part of this project and opting for the funding instead? I don't know who of you wants to answer that. I'm just curious, because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing everyone saying, we don't want it as part of our project, we'll just write a check. And it's kind of getting, for me, it's a little frustrating. And
it's a super challenging issue.
Yeah.
For sure. We met with Carrie and Bill, and they laid out the policy and what had happened at the Opus project as well. And they also laid out a model for us to contribute to the fund, and then the city would have the discretion to invest in, for instance, the Aon project or any other project. We also met with city council members and the mayor as well, and we talked through all of this, and in the end we came to that conclusion that was it was something that the city was acceptable to the city, and so we just went down that road.
because it's just kind of difficult to kind of blend it in. Is that what we're finding, or?
It's a huge challenge
Yeah.
in the metro area. It's just
Yeah.
I don't have the solution either.
Right.
I really don't. I
Okay.
wish I did.
Okay, just
But,
curious to hear. Okay. can I finish mine, or, okay, go ahead and follow up with that,
Well,
sure.
Sure.
What would it take to have you include that in this project? What would you give up? Would you need to give up, I guess? You're saying that there's something you can't do in order to accommodate it. What is that?
We just, we just discussed it with the city, and this is a very high-end project. It's a luxury project, and the thresholds of the economics of the requirement are just extremely difficult on us as developers, and I'm not exactly answering your question. It's something that is just it's just very challenging. I can't give you a solution for it, honestly. The approach that we took, and we talked to everybody, the council members, the mayor, and was to provide as much diversity as we can within the project, within our economic model, and we added micro units to the project, which I'm doing a project at the University of Minnesota, and we've got a lot of micro units that are very popular amongst not only students but residents and people that work at the hospital. They're 350 square feet. Ours are a little over 400 square feet. But so that was our approach to providing additional diversity to the project in terms of affordability.
Thank you. You're not alone. But I guess I'm just, again, passing this on to the council too, and just whoever, but I think it's really kind of falling on the shoulders for the city to really start showing us some, progress with what we're doing with these funds. So then I was just reading the SPAC, the traffic report. Just wanted to make sure everyone understood, that's part of the recommendation, part of the condition of approval, so you're not SPAC. Oh, you're there. Hey, hi. Well, so I just wanted to make sure that the applicant understood, the conditions, the recommendations, and you've reviewed all those and you're comfortable with those, because I know one of them was talking about that auto arrival court and all of that, so you're all good with all that. Okay. The site plan, I love this colorful site plan. I don't think that was in our packet, was it? So make sure the council gets that too. That would be great. Let's see. The engineering memo. Let's see if I can find that one. So can somebody, whoever was doing the stormwater, can you bring up L1.0, that, can we get that back up? Okay. Well, it's more the landscape plan was one of the, because they refer to that, so. I guess. Yeah, that works. So in that kind of shaded area or the lighter area, is there stormwater occurring within the city property? Because they're referring to the city, improvements being made within the city. Okay.
Yes, and that's something that needs to be worked out between the watershed and the city, the developer as well. And we were trying to activate past our property into and up to the current trail.
Okay.
On the promenade. So this space, basically the darker green space, is within city property in the promenade.
Okay.
So we'll need to work through maintenance agreements, responsibilities, but again, we were challenged and we heard that to really try to activate that and make that solid connection, and perhaps even get even further.
Yeah, so you're going to be doing something there maybe. Okay, that's excellent. I think that's great. Great partnership. And I think it's awesome what you're doing with that stormwater credit, because we are really, for that whole Southdale area, starting to look at that. So I think that's great. The review that we had from Mick, from in the sketch plan too, I think one of the items was, and that's not you, because you can sit down. So this is talking about the access directly from the roundabout. Who wants to talk about that? Did you guys look at that a little bit closer to remove access on Hazelton? And I know that was one of the significant comments that Mick had the last time, and that hasn't changed, and so I'm kind of curious why he's now is fine with it.
I think, Chair Olson, I think what this project does is it allows for future flexibility. So the comment was, if a road were to go up here, would you be able to access your property from the road? Absolutely.
Okay.
So today we're not doing that because there's no road here.
Right.
But in the future, this project would absolutely function from a road on the west.
Okay, great, so you
Now-
can do that.
Yep.
Okay, awesome, thank you. I also love the educational piece and the paneling. I think that's great. Other than that, I like it. I really like what you're doing. I really like the plaza. I like the building, so I think it's good. Did you have some comments? Sorry.
Yeah, so in terms of the SPAC transportation analysis, was that done on this project that was submitted, or was it done on the original?
So the SPAC was actually a third party to the city. And actually, you're here. So what are the questions you have? It's on this project. So the 298 stalls, the 186 unit. Yeah,
Right, I'm interested more in the pedestrian and bicycle facilities that they were talking about, that they thought were missing, so, yeah.
I'm Max Moylan with SPAC Consulting. So the PED stuff we were talking about was this project, but the version of the site plan we had looked at was a simplified one we saw a couple months ago. So it didn't show this connection down here, which is kind of what we were hoping for, something to connect to the lobby area. It only really showed connection over on the west side, then you have to walk around. So the PED connection to the promenade is something we wanted to see. Also, something we haven't seen really is bike parking facilities. We'd like to see that both for, the public visiting as well as people who live there, like long-term bike parking within the parking area.
Okay, so is that addressed at all in the plan, or no? Someone want to talk about it? Yeah.
We have, I'm going to skip over to the first floor plan. Basically, we have a large bike storage room here for residents themselves. And basically, along this front porch, the seating is past the arcade. There's opportunities to put like guest bike parking along here, or also along in this area, or over here. So there are opportunities. We haven't identified the outdoor ones, but the indoor is right here.
Okay, thank you. Let's see what else. And you also recommended, the potential for like a transit screen inside the building. Has any thought been put into that, or working with the Met Council on that, Metro Transit?
Absolutely on board with putting transit information in the lobby accessible for residents in the building.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see what else. So I wasn't here for the sketch plan, and so I'm going to annoy everybody by saying that I think the curving sidewalk is a mistake, but I mean, I know it was already recommended, so I'm not going to push the issue, but I just think, when you compare transportation as recreation versus transportation, or I'm sorry, walking as transportation versus walking as recreation. Or if you're going through a park or something and you want a nice curved pathway or something, that's kind of nice to have. But if you want to get somewhere, you want a straight line. And so I think generally that's a better way to do things. I mean, obviously you'd curve it around the roundabout, but because it uses a lot of space, and you could almost have something wider that would be, a multi-use, bicycle pedestrian facility or something. But anyway, I thought that would be a better use of that space. And then in terms of, with my fellow council members, terms of the affordable housing, well, if we wanted affordable housing, would the project go through if we were not going to take the money for it, if the city wasn't going to take the money for it?
Would the project go through? I can't, it's an immense challenge financially, far beyond, it's just an immense challenge. So I think we certainly have to take a step back on the project and relook at it. It's kind of starting from scratch, I think. So, the policy, we're complying with the policy that was presented to us by Bill and Carrie, and so.
Commissioner Lee.
This is a transportation question. I was wondering if you could run us through that a little bit. The report said that there would be generated 1,000 new trips during an average weekday, 69 new trips during the weekday in the AM peak hour, and 89 new trips during the weekday PM hour. Despite all that, it was definitely an increase in traffic, but despite all that, there was the conclusion that the roads can handle it. However, there was something about regulating traffic at either ends of Hazleton. Is that correct? Hazleton to France and Hazleton at York. So
Yep,
if you could explain that a little bit.
Yeah, as part of the study, we looked at 3 intersections, Hazleton and the roundabout right here. We also looked at Hazleton and France and Hazleton and York, because anyone coming out here almost anyone's going to be going to one of those. So we took video of those intersections, we counted all the cars that went through there, we analyzed how they operate now. And right now, no surprise to anybody probably, in the peak hour, there is some queuing, there are some delays on Hazleton at both York and France, just because those are such major arteries going through the city. So there is some queuing and delay there. The development here is obviously going to add a little bit more traffic, but it's not going to significantly impact the operations at those intersections because there's already so many cars out there. So it's just something that needs to be understood. There is queuing and delay there now. It's going to remain there, but the traffic from this development isn't going to be significant enough to double the queues or triple the wait times or have any sort of big impact like that.
And then when you did this study, you do not take into consideration the other projects that are coming up in this area. It's 66th and York, the Millennium, 191 units plus another 372 units for a total of 564 additional dwelling units. That is not in this count. It's just based on what you see today. Is that correct?
So it's based on what we see today, and we also we looked at the year 2020. So we forecasted some general growth, kind of looking at general projections from the city for, I guess that's 2 years from now, the year 2020. So we added that background growth to the existing volumes, and then we added traffic from this development on top of it. So to try and get a sense of general growth.
So that sounds like, yes, you would have known about those 2 projects.
Yeah, so those and other things.
Okay. All right. And then I think someone else already asked about the pedestrian connections. One of the things about the Greater Southdale Plan is part of the Give to Get is talking about an increased pedestrian experience as well as bicycling. In this area, bike paths are, where are they? In
the promenade, I believe, east side of the promenade. The east side, yeah. One's a bike trail, one's a ped trail.
How about east-west traffic?
East-west, I don't know that there's any dedicated bike areas. I think
it's just on Hazleton.
I think you'd just be on Hazleton in that area, yeah.
And it's not marked today or anything as bike? No bike lane?
I don't believe there's no bike share rows or anything marking it as a
okay.
bike
well, I guess maybe a recommendation would be we just did a bike pedestrian plan is to take a look at that. This is for the developer, the designer, and see what's forecasted for there. Because now, based on what Commissioner Miranda just said, maybe that part of that curved sidewalk does need to be a little bit wider and be part of the bike plan. I don't know if the bike plan says it should be in Hazelton as a designated lane or up on the sidewalk, but that is something that you might want to take into consideration. Okay, thank you. For the developer, Mr. Lund. Yeah, this is frequently going to be coming up, and here is the question. In your determination of the height of the building, can you, how is it, or how do we assess whether this is the right height? So tell me a little bit more about how you as a developer decide what the right height of a building is. And I don't mean in terms of it needs to be 210 feet, but you've obviously planned so many floors and so many units. So what are you trying to achieve there?
Well, let's see. There's several ways that we look at it. One was existing properties in the area, and we were mindful of the Weston. And one of the first things that occurred to me was maybe we don't want to go above the height of the Weston. So that was my first thought. I talked to Kerry about that as well, and he, mildly concurred with me about that. The second step that I take as a developer and working with my architectural team is parking. We have to have adequate parking for not only for the residents but also for the guests and for the visitors to the building and for the short-term parking. So you look at the water table, and then you look at the limitations on the height of the plinth, the limitation on that as well, and you kind of mix it together, and that's kind of how you do it. There isn't much more science to it than that for this project. I knew if we went taller, we may have significantly more pushback. Because we went above Weston, or for whatever reason, because this is definitely outside the boundaries of what's been done in this area. So aside from the Weston, so I felt that was a safe place to be, and then also looked at the parking strategy that we had and how many parking stalls that we felt we needed to accommodate the residents and the guests and all that. And it's about that approach, really. Yeah, and right, exactly.
Okay, so in a community where greater height and greater density is really the sticking point, every floor level counts. Mm-hmm. And as a planning commission, I'm just seeking to understand better about what's the right number. So if you have said that this needs to be a 20-story building, could you do it at 15? Could you do it at 12? Could you do it at 10?
Oh, okay.
That's sort of the question, not... I understand you have to go through those types of things. Where is your sort of break-even point? And obviously, for 20 stories, you're making a certain amount of profit. As you take off each story, I imagine then it becomes economically less feasible. At what point does it become infeasible? So I'll just leave that question to you.
Oh, man. That's a very challenging question.
I apologize. You're the first to come before us with this type of height, and I think it needs to be vetted in some aspects. So,
well, this isn't really. I just wanted you to know this. As I look at projects like this, I'm not looking at how can I maximize my profit. That's not what we're doing. So if we add another level, we can get more profit. It's really having a appropriate sized. I'm getting to your answer, but I just want you to know how the sausage is made. Basically, what's an appropriate size floor plate that provides. You don't have too many units on a floor, and you don't have too few units. So, we get a. If I look at Nick on Fifth, we're 13,000 square feet. If I look at If I look at Carlisle, that was 12,000 square feet gross. And what are we here? In that range? Yeah. We're in that range here. So, those are just kind of standards that, and we have 2 means of egress, we have 2 stairwells, we've got we have the elevators and such. And then it's really just starting to figure out where do we, there's not a science here. Where do we put our penthouses, and how many of those do we want? So we came up with 3 floors of that. We knew how high our plinth was going to be for our parking, and we ended up at 5. So where doesn't it become economically feasible? The land is expensive. I suppose if we could back into something, in a pro forma and figure out exactly where there's a break-even point, but I honestly have never looked at that. I just look at what feels, in my gut, and what our market study says, what feels appropriate for the number of units, building an efficient building, how many of each type of unit. So it's not, I don't really approach it quite the way you're, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, I just don't look at it quite that way. So,
My reason for asking the question is that as part of your request or the review of this proposal is that we are also being asked to look at an increase in density on this site.
Sure.
And then the question becomes, should we base the density on your project, which is going to require an increase up to 150 units, which is greater, I think, than the airport zone of Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
So
And the what zone, excuse me?
Pardon?
And the what zone? And
the airport zone of Minneapolis. So in other words, that's where they have greater density out by the airport.
Uh-huh.
So in order to come to some conclusion on that, I guess I'm asking you to tell me, why is the density so great on this? Obviously, it's because you've built out on a small parcel as far as you can go, and you're asking for a certain amount of height. So I'm trying to determine if there's a way to make this project go with not 150 dwelling units on this site, that great of a density. Not just for your site, but
Right.
we're being asked to make this the standard for all of MXC.
Right,
So,
understood. Well, I can only speak from my experience in that this density, our density that we're proposing is, because my high-rise experience has been, and most everybody else has been really in the city of Minneapolis. This is on the lower end of that, on a per unit, per acre basis. So, I think I mentioned to one of the early meetings I had with council member, or maybe it was with Bill and Carrie, or maybe both actually. To me, this feels like relatively kind of moderate density in terms of high rise, from what I'm used to in Minneapolis, where we can build. There aren't FAR requirements in certain areas. There aren't height requirements. I'm building 430 units at the University of Minnesota on 30,000 square feet. So the density there it's enormous. So I was encouraging. I think, I know, it was Mike Fisher. That's who it was. I was just saying, Mike, I just think that, the city should really consider 125 units or whatever it might be is, to me, a pretty low threshold if the city of Edina is going to go into towers and bigger projects. Because in reality, we're going to have tiny little sites. These sites are very hard to come by, and they're going to be, in my opinion, they're going to be hard to come by. They're going to be very small, but they're going to be extremely expensive. So what's going to happen is we're going to be building, or people are going to be asking to be building large properties, tall properties to accommodate the fact that they're paying a lot of money for the land. The land in this area is astronomical. Not quite what it is at the University of Minnesota, but it's pretty expensive. So.
Well, I do find it interesting that everything you've cited is in the city of Minneapolis, and I guess that begs the question: is Edina ready to become the city of Minneapolis? So that's one of the things we have to consider.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's something
So,
that the
all right.
city will have to decide.
Let me see, I think I had one more developer question. Oh, these units, can you give me an idea of what they would rent for?
Well, I'd say they're going to rent from $1,000, a little over $1,000 to penthouses of over $10,000 and over $10,000.
So the $1,000 was the, what, how did
Micro units.
The micro
small
unit.
micro units.
Okay. How about a typical two-bedroom?
A typical two-bedroom?
Well, two-bedroom, a two-bedroom.
A two-bedroom unit could be between $2,500 and $5,000, depending upon location, size, finishes, things like that. So
Okay,
it's
so
really,
this is really luxury housing. This is
Oh, yeah.
high-end, top-of-the-line, luxury, urban housing. Okay,
absolutely it is.
thank you.
Okay.
All right, so anymore, just for you were just put in the hot spot, but I'm going to just say, I think that this is a perfect location for what you're proposing. And what we're looking at for the greater Southdale area could be comparable to Minneapolis. And so I think it's awesome. I think what you're doing. So, okay, let's, anyone willing, let me ask Chris this. So we've got 3 items, right? 3. We've got height, density, and rezoning. Do we do these all together? Do they need to be separated as motions?
Probably be best to separate them.
Okay.
There's also the preliminary development plan.
Got it. Comprehensive plan, okay. All right. So, boy, who wants to tackle any of these? Anyone willing? Oh, is there? Okay, sure, we can open it. I thought everyone had any comments. Okay, open it up for discussion.
I just think there's a lot of issues here on this, that we're being asked to do. Okay, number one, the affordable housing. I would really like to see the affordable housing as part of this project. I don't know if that's, if the rest of the commissioners feel that way, but certainly that could be written in as a recommendation or something. My sense is that we have not been successful in getting any affordable units, and to simply keep taking a payoff without any plan of how that money gets spent or used or timeline, or we haven't seen it come forth and be proposed on other projects when we've had that opportunity, that it seems that the best opportunity is to get it when we're still doing the give to get. Thoughts?
I think that our presentation tonight was pretty clear. This isn't the project type that Round Horse proposed was a project type where the affordable housing should have been inserted. It would fit there. It could be built there. It's a building that can afford it. A high-rise tower, a concrete tower can't. It isn't appropriate. It isn't the right place. It's never going to work. It just doesn't work. PPL is in the process, and I know Aon is in the process of working with the city of Edina to put affordable housing in that will be very affordable. It will also be supportive. So those pieces are in the works. I don't know where they are. I don't know if the sites have been selected, but I know that they're working on them. So I have faith and confidence that city staff is well on top of those issues, and we will see in the short-term future opportunities for affordable housing. This project type simply is not one.
I think the contribution is part of the city policy to achieve their affordable housing goals. So I would be all right, recommending to the council, but I think as of now, the contribution is part of the policy.
It's a great location for affordable housing, and I mean, I would love to see it in this project, but it seems clear that, you know, there's history of a tide against that with recommendations to the developer, at least from the council who's going to ultimately decide upon this, to steer them in a way toward, you know, making that reimbursement versus including the building. And there must have been lots of conversations to get to that point. And so as much as I feel like that now, I feel like it's ultimately not my decision, or maybe just inappropriate at this time for me to decide without more of that history of conversation. And obviously they were steered that way, but you can't argue that this is a great location for it, you know. So hopefully that money is going to the parking lot behind it or something, you know, to just pay for the land, or a fraction of it.
The other thing that I thought was worth reviewing was that chart that showed the units per acre. This one's asking for the 150 units per acre, and I thought it was, I don't know, that it seemed high. Minneapolis, very high density, mixed use is 120. High density mixed use 50 to 120. Bloomington, where did I see that? Airport, I'm sorry, it was Bloomington Airport, south mixed use 30 to 131 was the highest. So if this developer thinks that it's possible to develop it at less density than 150, I would be interested in seeing that.
I don't know where it shakes out, but it seems obvious that some of that density is increased because of at least the inclusion of those micro units. And I mean, the more people you can pack in the place and can do it, you know, in an elegant way and offering more variety of housing types and offerings for people. So like even in a super luxury tower, I mean, even those micro units are edging to at least somewhat affordable for someone in this community. And I would think, I'd personally maybe want to see that number higher to have more of the micro units. But, you know, that's specific to this project where I don't think that number would really match up to some of the other projects we'd see if they didn't have those units. But I don't know what that breakout is, but just something to think about.
I agree too with what Jimmy was saying too. I really kind of like the fact that they're adding a lot of the smaller units, and that brings it down to where it's a little bit more affordable. And I think we're really getting, they're really giving some of the things that we've really been trying to get for the Southdale area, with that stormwater credit, and that I think that that plaza really will be used by the public. And yeah.
Yeah, I think the density helps. People are worried about it near single-family homes, right? But in the Southdale area, you really want the density so that transportation becomes more efficient, because in the Southdale area, if everyone's driving a car, then it's just not going to work, right? The congestion would be terrible. So we need to, the only way mass transit makes sense is if you have density. And so this is the area to do it, I think.
So is the plan in Greater Southdale to just have tower developments? Is that how we're increasing the density? Is that essentially what we're saying here? Well, what's the other piece?
Well, there'll be a variety of housing types.
But as he just said, the costs are so high that you can't do anything but build a tower?
Where this is, but if you move closer to the hospital, the prices are even higher. If you move further away, closer to 494, the prices are less. If you move around the corner and move into the Pentagon Park, the prices are less. If you look at, and I'm going to, ESG, I apologize, you need to probably make this argument in a wiser and more specific way, but give me a shot at it, and where I get it wrong, if you'll correct me. If you look at A 0.2, the reason that this tower is as dense as it is because you can't get the parking demands that the floor plate be this big. You have to ramp up. You can only ramp so fast. You have to ramp up a floor to get parking in. The ramp has to be X feet long to get there. That sets how long the building has to be. If the lot had been bigger, the building wouldn't be any bigger. The building is as big as the building has to be because that's how big the building has to be. If the lot had another 30 feet on the north side, the building wouldn't have been any longer. Is that reasonably accurate? The reason it is as dense as it is isn't because they were trying to cram as many units on the site as they could. It's because the building topology says this is how big a building of this type needs to be, and this is how big this particular site that is for sale at this time is. So when you put that topology on that site, that's the density you end up with. It doesn't mean that the next building will be of equal density. If the site is another 20 feet deeper or 30 feet deeper or 50 feet deeper, the building won't necessarily be any bigger, and the density will go down. Did I lie?
And commissioners, and that's what Trace was trying to explain earlier about just the length of this building. We could definitely, and that was when we were talking about this northern walkway. You know, there's a lot of stakeholders, right? And there's a lot of parameters of this project. We're trying to pull the building away from Hazelton. We're trying to do amazing things along the promenade. We have no back door to this project. And this is the length of the building. As Councilmember Hamilton said, you have slopes. You can only do a maximum slope of 5% to park on it. So this is the length of the building. And I think another goal of the Southdale area is to have small blocks. So we're on a small block. And this is, and I think density is really encouraged in this area. If you look at the staff report and look at the page 20 that goes through all the ways we're complying with the comp plan, this is what you want in this area. And that's what we've heard from staff, that's what we've heard from council members, and that's what we've heard from the mayor. And we just couldn't be more excited to be complying with what you want to do in the Southdale area.
I know it may feel like I'm putting everyone through the ringer, but this is a conversation that's going to continue, obviously, because Southdale is being developed. And I think these kinds of conversations helps bring everyone along. Hopefully people watch these things and the conversation actually gets started so that there's greater understanding for that. It would be helpful if the Southdale district plan came up with, again, I'm going to say guidelines or strategies for how we evaluate these properties. This one would have been a golden example. I mean, I want to acknowledge that the architect did, I think, an excellent job of addressing the things that we have given them. But again, when it's time to weigh in on making changes to the comp plan, changes to the density, allowances for height, there is always a gap between what we're trying to do and what it should do in order to meet the future vision. And I think the vision has been spelled out well. The implementation part is still very, very, very open-ended. So that's putting us, I think, as a planning commission on a case-by-case basis, and often seems to be that we treat each one of these differently, or that they're one-off cases. And I very much prefer that it not be seen that way. So the extended conversation is really towards that end, so that people understand how we arrive at this. And I think the longer we vet this particular parcel and this project, I think you merit a better understanding by everyone of why decisions were made the way they were.
Any other discussion? Okay.
So Carrie, I just called you Carrie, sorry. Chris. So we've got, again, I'm just trying to look, so we've got, why don't you show us what page we start? So I'm seeing recommendations, so on page 19 is the comprehensive plan amendment. Is that our first action?
Correct.
Okay.
And the language proposal for height and density.
Is within your approval findings, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Anyone want to take a run at that?
If I could find it, I would.
Here, you want to look at mine? I think you threw it out already. No, I just used mine.
thrown it in. I just taking clips off.
Our question for Chris.
I have a question for Chris.
Okay.
Chris, in that first part, there's 2 bullets. Can one be approved without the other, or do they have to be approved together? Is this one motion?
Well, they would both need approval for the project, unless you didn't want the comprehensive, or unless you're not recommending the language change for that. I guess I don't understand your question.
The flexibility language.
For
That's the second
density or
bullet.
for,
No, the way I read it is we would be able to approve a comp plan amendment to change the the density here, but also that it's asking for flexibility language to avoid that the future comp plan amendments, if projects should come in requesting greater than 100 units per acre.
right.
So in other words, we could vote yes on the first one. Is it necessary to have the second one have the, to incorporate the flexibility language for all MXC district?
Well, you wouldn't have to agree to that.
Right, but they're not together, they're not
Correct.
2 things together. Okay, thanks.
I would say we keep them together. If you're not happy, then you would vote against it, and then you can say why.
Yeah.
We could see where the motion goes. Okay, ready?
Yes. I'm going to take a shot at it, and maybe it's as simple as suggesting that I make a motion to approve the comprehensive plan amendment and the preliminary zoning to PUD as drafted by staff.
So you're blending them, or I think we were
Blending
just going
them.
to try to do.
I thought you said to blend them.
Oh, those first 2 bullet points under the comp.
Oh,
plan.
the comprehensive plan amendment to increase the density and the flexibility to be included in the comprehensive plan to allow the city council the flexibility to approve projects. Those 2, all right, we'll hold it there.
With the staff conditions.
Yes, with the subject to the staff findings.
Thank you. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second, then discussion?
Yeah, so I like that it's, I mean, on the one hand, I generally agree with the fact that the comprehensive plan shouldn't have height restrictions in it, because that's not really what a comprehensive plan does. On the other hand, we're talking about MXC, which is Southdale, which is fine, Grandview, which is fine. There's already a proposal for a fairly tall building there, which is next to a highway. But apparently this does mean that 50th in France would be included, because that's MXC, correct? Would be, okay. And I'm just trying to wonder where you might have a tower at 50th in France. So,
Well, the zoning won't change. It's just
Okay.
the comprehensive plan. You wouldn't have to amend it. Zoning is still the underlying
okay,
height.
right. It's just something that just seems a little odd. I guess that it was zoned the same way or the MXC is the same at 50th in France. Just seems a little odd. But, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lee, did you have a comment on this too, or no?
You look like you-
Yes, I think the issue is by incorporating the flexibility language, the reason for that is so that the justification was given this time frame about if any other proposals come back after June, we could not have a comp plan amendment. My objection to this flexibility language is it in effect allows pretty much any project to be approved that's regardless of the current zoning. We would still look at the zoning, but as you can see, we're already even as a comp plan, it's not stopping the planning commission or the city. So obviously the zoning would just go ahead and also be granted a change in zoning. So my issue is this, that it does not put a moratorium on all development. Development can proceed, it just has to match the zoning. What this flexibility language allows is for these, what I'm calling super high-rise towers, to be grandfathered in without having to go through the comp plan amendment process. If that's what this planning commission supports, then yes, then include the flexibility language. I would like to see the two separated out. I just think maybe the results in the voting will end up being the same, but I think as a planning commission, we have to acknowledge that those are two different things. They're not one and the same, and we can still accomplish what we need to for this project without having to have the tag-along a rider of the flexibility language.
So we have a motion on the table. Any other discussion? Did you have more discussion?
Yeah.
Motion in a second, isn't there?
Yeah, I just have discussion or a question. I guess regarding the flexibility language specifically, where was that derived from specifically? Where there was like the 10 bullets of flexibility language, right? I mean, there is at least criteria for the council or whoever to consider, and there was about 10 things. I just want to know where that came from, and is there something missing on there? Since it's going to be, those are going to be kind of guiding points to the development community about, they're basically guiding principles of the flexibility language. I think when you first brought it up, there was maybe like 10 points, pedestrian-oriented, sustainability. Where did those come from? Okay. Just based off of the Southdale guiding principles or other small area plans? Or
Look on page 7, number 10, building heights. That is our current comp plan. And what you see in not highlighted is how it reads currently. What city staff is recommending is that we add in the highlighted yellow, red language.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'm trying to get to is there something in those bullets that is missing? I'm just asking fellow commissioners, is there a guiding principle in these mixed-use centers that we really want to focus on or prioritize that maybe isn't on there? Just because it's the first time I'm seeing it and I don't know where it was specifically developed from.
I'm comfortable with them. They really kind of follow kind of what we've been trying to summarize as we go along with the Southdale.
So is there something,
I didn't see anything missing. But.
Okay.
I think staff worked pretty hard.
So we have a motion.
And a second.
And a second. And I think we're done with discussion. So are we ready? So all in the comp plan and those the two pieces to it, yes. That's the motion. That was seconded. Okay, so all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries. You've got my packet.
Would you like it back?
The next action we're going to be taking is the preliminary rezoning to PUD and preliminary development plan.
I move that we recommend approval of the preliminary zoning to PUD and preliminary development plan as outlined in the staff report with conditions noted through page 21, starting on page 21. Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second, is there discussion?
I would just like to say that in general, I support that, but I want to make the comment that I can't support it because of the fact that the affordable housing was not part of the project.
Any other discussion? So the motion's on the table, been second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Did we catch them all, Chris? Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. So reports, recommendations, do we have anything from staff or anything to?
Are you looking for staff comments?
Yep. Well, I'm
Okay.
jumping around. We still have correspondence and petitions, which I wonder why we even have that on there, because we never have anything.
There's community comment. too.
Pardon?
Community comment.
Yep. Oh, right, I always skip that. That and public hearings today. So so the next piece is community comment. Is there anyone here who has any comments? No.
Move to close, or
Thank
does that
you.
need an action?
I don't know.
Okay.
I never know what we have to do with that. Do we have to make a motion to close that? No. Okay, so moving on to reports, recommendations, correspondence, and petitions, and combining those. Chair and member comments, anything? Yes, go.
It's come up several times that the Southdale Small Area Plan needs to provide a stronger, clearer framework to measure its future, its direction, and why it's going, how it's going there, how it's going to get there, and what the implementation is going to be. Remember that Southdale is 790 acres, twice the size of downtown Minneapolis. What it's trying to create, what the whole Southdale Small Area Plan is trying to create and has been trying to create for 3 years, is a new way to look at zoning. It isn't trying to say, this is the same as what we've been doing in 50th and France, only larger. This isn't the same as what we've done at Grandview, only different. This is so different that it hasn't been done before. There's a great deal of research that's going on to find out what's happening in the world and how they're writing their zoning codes so that they're aspirational, so that they're understandable, so that they can be implemented. It makes it exceedingly difficult when it hasn't been done before to do it. Folks are meeting once a week and have met once a week for 3 years to try to resolve it. We're going as fast as we can and working as hard as we can. If anyone would like to come to those meetings and sit in on them to understand them better and to see what the process is, they're public meetings and they're more than welcome to be there. If they have, there's opportunity for public discussion at the beginning and the end of every meeting. If there are issues that people want to bring up that the small area group can work on and chew on and provide clarity where they can, they will. But I think if one were to attend it, you'd see the difficulty is it's a factor of 100 times what a factor of 100. The 44th and France group met how many dozen times, and you're talking about 8 acres? We're talking about 790 acres. More than 20,000 people. it isn't an implementation plan that's going to have heights and densities. It isn't. Because it's going to stretch out for 25 or 30 years or more. So that's where it is and that's what it is. And if folks would like to come see it, come understand it, come participate in it, contribute to it, they're more than welcome. But it isn't a slam dunk by a long shot. And it isn't because folks aren't working on it.
Agreed. It is. We're getting there, getting closer. How's your stuff going?
70th and Cahill update. We have received, the small area group has received a draft plan from the consultant team. We just received that last week. March 24th was the delivery date. We will be looking at that. I think our comments are due back by April 4th. And then with a potentially final meeting with the small area group, April 5th, to collect all the edits and red lines and comments for a final preparation. So I think those are and then I don't think they have, then I think they're delivering, well, I suppose it would come to the Planning Commission, like it did in a work session, and then probably sometime to City Council later part of May. So we probably will wrap up that April 5th meeting. So, thank you.
So, and Carrie, I did it again. I'm so sorry. It's because you're sitting in his chair. So, Chris, 50th
Yes.
in France, is that getting kicked off too?
Starts Monday.
Yeah,
okay.
well, we're meeting about that on Monday, so,
o'clock.
pardon me?
What commission is that?
Ion and John. So John's doing double duty.
Double
I have
duty.
nothing else to do.
Yeah. Great. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, just a comment. I don't know if anyone caught it, but the the Caribou recommendation of denial 8-1 that we put to council got approved 4-1 by them. So if you weren't aware, or if you were, maybe check out the meeting, see what they had to say that kind of differed from our opinion, and maybe make that a reminder to just encourage you to, or encourage us all to interface with them maybe a little more, because that kind of differing results pretty frustrating sitting in this table. So, what'd you say?
Who voted? Who's the dissenting?
Councilmember Stewart. And so, just check it out. I was pretty frustrated to hear that. I watched it, and I see some of the point, but I think it's more of just a note of encouragement to just interface with the council more, to just get to a better middle ground so that things aren't that starkly contrasted. It just looks weird to the community too. And I'm not saying we should all be in alignment, but clearly there's a big difference of opinion there. So just a comment, I guess.
All right. The last thing too, I think we have time to promote this more, but May 3rd, we're going to have everyone get together, all the commissions and other representatives from the community, and we're going to do the midpoint for that bridge, or remember, what do we call it, the bridge between the Vision Edina and the comp plan. So we did that, when was that? That was like we had the big map, remember that, barefoot on socks? I've got pictures of you guys with socks on. But anyway, we're doing the midpoint of that on May 3rd. So it's a Thursday night, 6 to 9, Public Works. And it's going to be really cool because I think everyone's going to be coming in. We're asking all the other commissions to bring their 5 top goals or big things that they've kind of figured out with their comp plan review or studies. Anyway, I think it's going to be a really good opportunity to bring the silos together
Is this open to the public, or is it just for?
Well, public is open, public will be invited. I don't know if they're going to be invited, but it's an open
Or
meeting.
is it a work
so-
session?
It's an open meeting,
It's
but
an
it's
open
more of a
meeting.
work session to bring the commissions and the work groups that did the small area plans or
Yeah.
are working on the small area plans to get together
Yeah.
and connect.
Yeah, so it's because everyone's invited, there's going to be quorum, so the public will be, it's an open meeting, but the activities are going to be with the commissions and such.
So will an announcement go out that maybe we could share with our small area work group? Or?
Yeah, we're getting that put
Yes,
together.
they will be invited, actually.
Oh, they will?
Yes.
They'll already, we know, you have their names?
Yes, I
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that stuff hasn't gone out. That's why it's a little premature, but just to get it on your calendars, because I know it's a Thursday night, but it's a good thing to participate in. Anything else? Motion to close. Lou, you didn't get to do it the last time.
Motion to close?
Is there a second? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.